Back in 2015, UK theme park enthusiasts were being teased for a ride that the UK had never seen before at Thorpe Park. A ride bound to terrify most Brits as it seemed to revolve around using your brain. Soon after, it was revealed that the ride would have a very interesting IP, as Derren Brown was not only revealed to be a main character in the ride, but also helped designing the entire experience. To which Derren Brown fans like myself responded by shitting their heads out of their bottoms. After waiting a few months to find out if it was a new roller coaster, or an escape room, or a mirror maze, but god, who'd had one of those to a theme park? It was finally revealed. Derren Brown's Ghost Train would be a new horror-filled VR attraction, promising to redefine the Ghost Train and to warp the public's perception as to what theme park rides were capable of. Bold words. Well, the attraction finally opened in 2016 and closed, and then opened again, and then closed again, and opened again, and closed again. Yeah, this ride was more horrifying for the maintenance team than anyone else. The public opening was delayed by about 2 months, and the first year was marred by teething issues that the best dentists in town couldn't seem to fix. But today, I'm not going to be talking about its mechanical issues or its spooky, outdated VR headsets. No. I'm going to be talking about something much more intricate, more interchangeable, and arguably more important to the rider's enjoyment. Today, I'm going to be talking about the story. So with that, welcome to ReRides, a new series on my channel I'm going to be starting where I take past, present and future theme park attractions and give their story a little bit of a retelling. Just a quick note before I start anything, this is not a shot or an attack at anyone who is involved in designing the ride. They are professionals with a lot more limitations than I have here, because after all, this is a fantasy retelling. Having said that, I am a storyteller myself and entertainment is entirely subjective, so personally, I have a few changes I'd like to make. I'm a big fan of Derren Brown's Ghost Train as a whole. It's a kick-ass concept with genuine ability to scare people. It has this large, ominous building which just feels like it has this supernatural attracting power. It's a mystery from design and story perspective, both inside and out. It has some of my favourite details in a queue line I've been in, even though the queue line itself is literally just a cattle pen, and its marketing was perfect. Well, almost perfect. Derren Brown's Ghost Train's had multiple different stories over the years. It's had fracking bad, government bad, society bad, social experiment where Derren Brown himself comes out with a camera shouting, "It's just a prank, bro." Okay, one of those might be over-exaggerated. All of these stories individually have had glimmers of hope, but have ultimately all fallen a little bit short. One massive reason for this is that the base story is just a little bit over-complex, so they end up taking bits out, adding bits back in, changing bits at the wrong time, and it's all falling to bits now. So, I'm going to try and retell the story. First off, I hear you asking, Cal, you charming and handsome man, why don't you just keep the story exactly how it is? Well, I'll tell you why. Without spoiling the whole ride, of course, because that's kind of the point of it, and I think if you don't, Derren personally comes and shoots you. Anyway, currently the ride exists in two separate universes. The real world in which Derren says that it's an attraction and that there's no real threat and that you can detach yourself from it from just closing your eyes. And the ride universe in which you're running from your life for a very serious threat. That admission that it's not real right off the bat puts the ride into the rider's hands. It means that they can control their own experience rather than you controlling theirs. Which in turn makes it a lot less scary. Imagine if you're a kid having a nightmare and as the monster's towering over you about to attack, he just stops and goes, "Oh, by the way, none of this is real. You're just having a nightmare right now because you ate too much cheese before bed. My name's Kevin, by the way. I'm just a random bloke and you have school in the morning, so you've got to like get this over with quickly. So let's go." So as well as changing a few things with that, I'm going to put the story into a little more context, make the ride a little more reliable, and just change some of the hardware, should we say. The rules that I'm setting myself for this series include that the main hardware has to stay. So in this case, that is the train and the tracks that it goes along. So if I was doing a roller coaster, I couldn't change the layout of the roller coaster. I could just add a few bits onto it or take a few bits away. Also, I know there are a few rumors floating around about when the Derren's IP actually runs out. Right now, I don't have an answer for that. I'm going to assume that it's not next year and that I can just do this attraction as it is now. However, I have kept that in mind, and there is a very easy fix if I want to go back and just change it a little bit to remove Derren completely from the ride and just have it as a ghost train. First off, very important thing. What is the name of my attraction? Now, I was very tempted to just go back to Derren Brown's Ghost Train, but I feel like because this is a completely new story, I should probably add a little subheading on that, like Rise of the Demon is. And this is going to give a lot away. So the name of the ride is Derren Brown's Ghost Train Platform 15. I know, it wasn't the most popular when it left, But I have a few very good reasons for doing this. When Platform 15 first came in, I think a lot of us went, ooh, spooky train maze, spooky train ride, they're gonna think something's happening here. And then nothing was happening here. The ghost train ran its own locomotive and Platform 15 went about its own spooky and ooky business. So today what I'm doing is merging the experiences, fixing up a few of the plot holes and just making the ghost train a little bit more of an experience. So going through the queue line, you keep nearly everything the same. Keep all of the audio, all of the posters, all of the anti-subcore stuff, all of the anti-fracking stuff. Keep all of it. Except in the Pixel room. Just add a few dark tinted windows to the outside so that you can see through, but not that clearly. Inside you have a table with some lab equipment on it, and on the walls you have a lot of posters with a lot of scribbling on them. And a lot of it's very indistinct, you can't really make much out, but you can make out 3 words. Oil, screech, and run. Through the curtain, you get to the pre-show room, and Derren Brown's standing there with a gun. No, I'm kidding. Okay, I'm kidding. You step into the room, and there's a stage at the front. Derren sitting in a chair, and behind him is a whiteboard, a small desk, a small TV, and a clipboard. And it's all set up a little bit like a research bay. This is everyone, yes? Okay, great. So welcome everyone, and thank you very much for signing up for this research. I know there wasn't much information beforehand for you to go off, but don't worry, we'll explain everything now. You may have heard stories on the news about Subcore Energy, a company fracking here in Thorpe. There's been a lot of backlash and protests against it. Well, their work has just been halted by a blockage to their drill. And when they went down to investigate it, they found an old Victorian train carriage buried deep within a tar pit. Now, I know, I don't really understand either how a train carriage could get a mile underground. However, that'll all be explained by our research team later. The important thing is now they've pulled that train carriage from the tar pit and back to our research bay here, but they haven't restarted their work. So here is your task. Being underground for an extended period of time can have some strange psychological effects. So I want you to go underground with them and begin monitoring them on why their work hasn't restarted. Are they just unmotivated? Can they not get back to work? Or is there something darker? Now, don't be scared. You won't be down there for nearly as long as they've been, and there'll be no adverse effects to you. We're going to send you down there on a specially made train, and on this train, please do not stand up out of your seat. No matter what happens, it is just not safe. Right, I think you're ready to go. I'll send you through to our research team now so they can give you more information. Stay safe, good luck, and enjoy the experience. So, pre-show 1 done, let's break it down. I've changed a lot of the dialogue, which I know a lot of people love the pre-show, but I've done it for a very good reason. A, it puts this scene within the universe of the ride. Rather than being an expose on what the ride actually is, it's more of a character building and story driven scene. And you don't do that jarring jump from ride to real life, then back to ride as you go from the queue line to pre-show 1 and then through to the rest of the ride. It just doesn't work usually. And B, it just simplifies the narrative a little bit more. I know that it's a simple pre-show and it's a lot less theatric than the current one, but it achieves a lot more. Rather than being, clowns are spooky, aren't they? Here's how fear works, where am I? It's a lot more focused now and important to the ride. In the original, Derren works as a talking head, a leader of the experience rather than a part of it, whereas in my version, he is a character, and a character that will become very important later on. And it means that you now have a purpose too. You're not just riders going through the experience, you're volunteer researchers who don't really know what they've signed up for. Which, yes, been there, done that, but it's a theme that people recognise, which hopefully, in this new context, should be a little bit easier to digest. So progressing forwards, the lights come up, the doors swing open, and you progress through to the next room, up a flight of stairs, where at the front, there is a massive whiteboard, and a researcher waiting there for you, dressed as a scientist, but not shit school play scientist. On the whiteboard is multiple drawings of the carriage, with some saying expected damage from the tar, and comparing it to actual damage from the tar, and that'll become important later. And this is accompanied by a few dates, a few times, and a few more calculations and numbers just to make it look a bit more full. Welcome to the former Thorpe Junction. I say former because we've taken this whole building and we've repurposed it into a research facility for a very important project. You see, through this door is the recovered carriage of the Sleeper Express, a train that left this station in 1889. A train that came to a tragic stop when a signalling failure caused the train to derail from the tracks and sent each and every one of its passengers into a nearby tar pit, never to be seen again. But here's the funny thing. Subcore recently discovered one of these carriages deep underground. They dragged it back to this research bay using an underground rail system that we helped them develop. But when they brought it back to us for inspection, we noticed that although the tar had clung to the side of the carriage, there's no damage. No erosion, no marks, nothing. And that makes you think, if that is what happened to the carriage, what happened to the passengers? Anyway, no, enough about that, you don't need to worry. What Derren wants for you to do is to head underground and just check up on how the subcore workers are, because there's been a long delay since they discovered this carriage. So to send you down there, why not just use what we've already built? The tracks are already there, we've renovated the train carriage, fitted it with a motor, and you should be good to go. There's a few stops along the way for researchers to get on and off at, so don't worry if other people join you while you're on the train. We'll make it less lonely. Now, just before I send you down there, I just need to take your photo for posterity, of course. So if you guys can just all gather round and just look directly at this camera up here in 3, 2, 1. Great. That'll come in really handy for us later. Now, on the train, stay seated unless told otherwise. Do exactly what you're told and all of this should be a breeze. You'll be back up here in no time. Or would you look at that? Your carriage awaits. So Pre-Show 2 essentially just expands on Pre-Show 1. It's there to build more story rather than start the story. But yes, Pre-Show 1 sets up the universe, while Pre-Show 2 adds context to the universe, which is very important. It adds a link between the two different attractions that I'm merging by mentioning stuff like the Sleeper Express, Thorpe Junction, and the tar pits that the Sleeper Express ended up in. But it gives it a slightly more progressed story. You see, in Platform 15, it was just assumed that everyone who you came across in that maze was a ghost of Screech Rye Village, whereas in this attraction, it's a little more ambiguous. You're not too sure if they're alive or ghosts, or if what you're seeing is truly real. And that just makes it a little bit more unsettling. This pre-show also directly references that, which is then wiped off as either speculation or just straight up delusion, which would be perfect for this ride now that I think about it. And taking your photo seems really silly, I understand that, but it'll be important later, I promise. So the door swings open and the group steps through into a huge looking room, and the centerpiece of this room is this old Victorian train carriage, suspended from chains from the ground, with tar tainting the sides. There's a pool of thick black tar on the floor and tar dripping from the sides of the carriage, but low enough so that you can still see the details and still clearly make out that it's an old Victorian carriage. The host inside tells the group that the train is suspended so that the tar doesn't infect anything else, because they're not quite sure what it does at the moment. They just know it's not quite right. Anyway, you go into the train, you go to sit down, and here's where one of the biggest changes happens. You sit down and you do not put on your VR headsets, because the VR headsets are dead. I've ripped them out personally with my own two hands for two good reasons. First of all, morning checks. Don't have to check everyone. You're welcome hosts. I tried to see if there was a way into removing the VR headsets and opening the ride earlier, like with the park, rather than 12 when it opens now. But it's not possible, you know, like engineers and ents, they got to do their thing, so we'll let them be. Second of all, it takes the ride from being an isolated experience into a group experience, which I know sounds a lot less scary, but it is a lot more entertaining. You see, if you were just on your own in your VR headset and you're not scared by what you see at all, this ride will be no fun. This ride will be absolutely nothing. And I've heard a lot of people coming off this ride just disappointed rather than entertained. In this situation, you're going to have people scared on the train. So either you yourself are going to be scared, or you're going to be laughing at the shrieks of terror of other people on this train. Anyway, the VR replacement. I've made this experience a lot more actor-led, so instead of hosts who just knock your leg on the way through, it's more actors adding to the experience while you're on the train. And to replace the effects inside of the VR, instead of headsets, I've gone with screens outside of the windows, which I know sounds like it would be more difficult to create scares with, but it also creates a lot more opportunity for entertainment, including scares. So the inside of the train is done up like a modern London Underground train because I said so, and it means that this redo costs less money. Also in canon, they said that they renovated the train and for some reason just went with the modern day Piccadilly line, so whatever. So this train is going to be making multiple stops before going underground as stated earlier. Before we reach the first stop, an actor on the train says something along the lines of, "Oh, we should see plenty of researchers getting on at this stop." When we reach there, the platform is empty. Strange. "Okay, well there should be more coming on the next few stops," he says as he gets interrupted by the train audio saying, "The next station is closed." Now through all of this, the lights of the carriage keep on flickering on and off, and there's a few weird screeching sounds as the train moves. Essentially, just make this the modern day Bakerloo line, that's terrifying enough. The adverts on the train are for disturbing things with lines such as, "Do you have trouble remembering your dreams?" Except not that, because I've just stolen that straight from a Tom York advert for one of his albums, so something more original. I'll put a few ideas up here if I have any by the time that this comes out. Eventually we get to another empty platform, and as we get in, the train audio comes over and says, "The next station is Screech Rye," the canonical village in which the accident took place where the train plunged off the tracks into the tar pit and presumably killed everyone in the town. Or did it? Who knows? Anyway, we eventually get to Screech Rye, and here, there's a secret. So in the actual ride system, there is a platform here which isn't used in the current ride. So I'ma use it. The train pulls into Screech Rye, the doors open, and two actors come on, both human, both in scraggly dress clothes, quite dirty, and they're coming up to people on the train, spouting absolute gibberish. Okay, so it's not actual gibberish, it's important things to the story, but they're saying it so quickly and they're so panicked that not much of it actually comes out. Some of the few distinguishable words that they do say are oil, screech, and eyes. Very similar to the words that we found in the old Pixolve building in the queue line. So the actors who are already on the train kick the crazy actors off of the train, and the journey continues. The train reaches one more station, a packed research facility full of researchers waiting to get on the train. But as they're waiting for the train, at the back of the platform, three human-like figures with pale faces and tar running from their eyes attack researchers. The other researchers flee the platform instantly, scattering all about, and you're just left with you, the train carriage, and these three creatures. The creatures come up to the windows and they're banging to be let in. The cracks start to show in the windows, but the train starts to leave, but not before one of the creatures make a diving attempt at the window. Doesn't make it, but it should provide a scare. As the train goes underground, the actors on the train brief the group on what dangers they might find down there, but also say to not believe those maniacs who was there in Screech Rye. They say that someone will pick them up off of the train, they might be wearing a gas mask or some protective clothing to protect them from prolonged exposure to gas down there. Wink wink. They'll have a lantern with them to guide the way, which definitely, absolutely 100% will not fail during this experience. But just after all this, the driver comes over the speaker and seems quite panicked. He says that through the headlights, he can see that the tunnel is narrowing. This is followed by a large screeching sound through the train, and just out of the windows, you can see the old Victorian carriage being torn away from the sides of this train. It's all starting to go wrong. The train carries on and you get to the station, and when you get there, yes, there is a person in a gas mask waiting for you outside. They have the gas mask and they have the lantern, and they'll be guiding you through the rest of the experience, and they say to you that if you want to be safe down here, then you better listen up and listen to them and no one else. They lead you through to a dark tunnel with a chain link fence on your right and a train up ahead. The train is very obviously broken. It's a modern train, but it's busted through the wall, and there's smoke pouring out from the bottom of the train, kind of just lingering around the floor. As you get closer and closer to this train, the lantern by the guide starts to flicker, and the guide turns around to the group and starts bashing it against their hand, trying to get it to work, and as they do, the headlights of the train flash on. So the headlights come on and they are bright enough to kind of blind the group for half a second, so they turn their heads away in theory. As they do, one of the tar-crying creatures climbs out from behind the wall and starts to make their way towards the group. The guide luckily fixes their lantern, turns around and sees what's happening, so it gives them time to open the chain link door to trap this creature into where it is. But the guests still have to walk past it in order to get to the next room, and the whole time this creature is just reaching out for them, trying to grab them through the chains. You progress into the next room, a large room with a Victorian steam train as the centerpiece, and in the window of the driver's seat is Derren Brown. And he says, at this point you're probably starting to question what's happening, what has happened, and what is going to happen. And quite frankly, you'll never truly know the answers to these questions. You'll only be able to judge your own perceptions. What I can tell you is why all of this is happening. I myself have been very interested in the tricks that I can play on your mind for many years. But the more interesting experiment is the tricks that you can play on your own minds. The feeling of being trapped without knowing where you are, not knowing whether what you see in front of you is part of a show or if it's terrifyingly real. It can cause strange psychological effects where you envision your own fears, or even worse, fail to recognise real threats that are right in front of you. Well, unfortunately for you, the only way to find out what is real and what is not is to continue forwards. That's why we're all here. You have willingly let me test your limits, and now you are realising that that is quite a risk to take. At this point, the lights start to dim a little bit. Let's get one thing perfectly clear. I am not a cruel man. And if you disagree with this, then I'm only a cruel man because you have deemed it so. I don't wish to harm you. There is no gain in me harming you, you who have now become my subjects, my disciples, if you will. Harming you does not aid what I'm trying to do, as this is not a selfish deed. This is no more than a trial of spirit. You are all my Isaac, and your own curiosity as to what I am capable of has led you down a very dark path. But in reality, this is not about what I am capable of. This is about what you are capable of. I am not the one subjecting you to all of this horror. This is your own doing. And if you want this all to stop, the only way is to press forward. But just remember, that is of your own choice, not mine. Which means you'll forgive me, won't you? Derren looks to the side towards the masked guide as they slowly take off their mask to reveal a pale face and black tar tears. And as they do, they screech, set off a strobe effect within the room, and the room suddenly floods with actors, all with these tar tears running down their faces. 2 uninfected actors then open up the double doors to let guests back onto the train, but when you sit back down, you realise that there are many more infected than you think. Through the windows you can see hundreds of tar creatures just pouring through the doors and onto the platforms as the uninfected actors try to push them back and away. Eventually the doors close and you set off back up this tunnel, but you realise that all the way up this tunnel there are crawling and climbing tar creatures the whole way up. The train keeps zooming through the stations as fast as it can until the train starts to slow. And when the actors on the train try to contact the driver to know what's happening, they get no response. The driver is unconscious. And as the train comes to a complete stop, out of the window you can see a dimly lit tunnel filled with infected tar creatures. They fill the windows with their faces as the front row of them bend down. And suddenly the train starts to tip, and then tips the other way. They're trying to derail the train. The infected keep rocking this train back and forth, and the more it rocks, the more you realise that there is a tar pit right below the tracks. The train continues to rock back and forth, the glass breaks as the infected try to break through, and finally, the train topples off of the tracks and hurtles towards the tar pit below. And as it does, over the train speakers comes Derren Brown. And stop. Don't worry, you're all safe, just stay seated. As Derren's face comes up on the advertising screens that they have within the trains. This whole experience has been part of my new special, The Ghost Train. Everything you've just experienced has been designed to test your willingness to achieve tasks, challenge your perception of heroes and villains, and most importantly, show that your own perceptions are a lot more powerful than you think. You trusted those you had no reason to trust just because they said they were in power. You took orders from those you did not need to take orders from just because you recognized as them being higher than you. And you watched as those people betrayed you. And yet you still carried forward. You were told explicitly that the next part would be scary and that it would be detrimental to you. And yet you still carried forward. Well, the experience is now over. Please, when you're ready, stand up and follow the host out of the train. And thank you for being part of this experience. So, the whole time, it was a show. And yeah, of course it was. You just got attacked by tar creatures who just crawled out of a tar pit, all because Derren Brown said you should go underground. Normal Tuesday, right? So as he explained, Derren has been behind this whole experience as a puppet master, creating an experiment for his new show, Ghost Train. This is in a similar vein to some of his other specials like Apocalypse, The Assassin, and a few others like that. But doesn't it just sound like a special? You're led to believe that this horrible thing has happened, so you inhumanely go in and try and investigate, and then you get repercussions, both socially and environmentally, all under the banner of the name Ghost Train. It sounds perfect. I think it sounds like a show at least, and the whole moral of the show within this ReRides universe is, despite being told that what's ahead is scary and detrimental, the human mind's curiosity pushes it forward, for better or for worse. Anyway, the experience isn't quite done yet. Remember that group photo that was taken in pre-show 2? Yeah, that becomes important here. So you exit the ride and go to the gift shop, and there is a load of shirts and souvenirs hung up, and there is also a Pixelve person at the front with a load of screens behind them showing these photos. As people gather around to look at them, the host goes into another room and just tells them just to have a look at the photos, see what's funny about them, anything like that. But as the host leaves, the lights in the room start to flicker and the photos start flashing on and off. And when they flash fully back on again, the walls behind are dripping with tar, and every face in the photo now has the tar tears running down their cheeks. And like, you can do that with technology that you can get from Snapchat and stuff like that. They should make a Snapchat filter. Oh yeah, okay, we got it now. Anyway, photos change, lights flicker, and lights go out. And when they come back up, there is a extra mutated, tar-crying creature in the middle of the room. Make them Hulk-sized, make them absolutely grotesque, this ripped Victorian suit with no pupils in their eyes, just whites, and just have them go insane, scaring people. Have that happen for about 5 seconds, lights go back off. When they come back up, they're nowhere to be seen, and the room is as normal. The host comes back and you're all let out. So with these changes, I've achieved a couple of things. First, I've linked together 2 Thorpe attractions, loved or not, but they really should have had a link in the first place. I've had a little more lore and a little more story, a little more intrigue within that story, while also simplifying the whole thing into something that's a little bit more comprehensible. And most importantly, I've put the ride entirely within its own universe. Rather than jumping back and forth between the real world universe and the ride universe, I've put Derren and the whole train within a ride universe, which is very important. So yeah, that is my pitch for what I would do with Derren Brown's Ghost Train. Did you hate it? I hope not. But if you did, let me know. And if you loved it as well, let me know down in the comments what you thought of it. And while you're down there, also suggest some more rides that I should do this for. I really want to make this into a series. I want to make it as interactive as possible so that you guys can get involved as well. Anyway, with that being said, I've been Cal, this has been ReRides, and I will see you very soon.